Radio Retrofuture.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of Radio Retrofuture. And tonight I have a very special guest, Jeff Mach of Jeff Mach Events. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
Yes, and thank you too for being here tonight. There was a bit of a time mix-up, but that's okay. We're live now. And I suggest we're gonna get straight into it, because Jeff Mach has a bit of a lot of pressure on him with Darkside of the Con coming up this weekend.
I leave in literally 24 hours, perhaps a little less, perhaps 23 hours or so from now. I will leave for Darkside of the Con.
Impressive. Well, in that case, let's get right into it. So let's just start with, who is Jeff Mach and what do people know him from?
Well, I suppose it depends on what people, but I have been running events for unusual folks here in the United States for the past 20 years now. And I'm probably, or for a long time, I was probably best known for the Wicked Winter Renaissance Fair, our unusual, unorthodox indoor Renaissance Fair. But that was eventually eclipsed by the Steampunk World's Fair, the world's largest steampunk event. And we ourselves have become really involved in the culture and the concept of what steampunk could be. And from there we then jumped to the Geeky Kink event, which quickly became not only the world's largest kink event for nerds, but also one of the largest kink events on the eastern coast of the United States, and indeed one of the larger kink events in the country. And now we are working with the folks from Vampire Freaks on Darkside of the Con, which is the United States' as far as we can tell, last standing, surviving, only Gothic/dark alternative convention that's weekend long. And that's terribly exciting for us.
All right. Yeah, I just showed people the events list. It's quite an impressive list of events you've got on your website, jeffmachevents.org. So it kind of interests me. However, let's keep going with your history. How did you get into event organizing? And could you tell us a little bit of how the event landscape changed for, well, alternative culture, so to speak?
You know, I started with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was always interested in attending events. I always loved whatever events I did attend, but I hadn't considered running events until I got very involved with Rocky Horror in college, and there was a peculiar situation, too silly to go into, wherein the college would not let us actually put on the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So we had this situation where we had this whole group of Rocky Horror people and nowhere for them to go. And it was particularly challenging because back then, in the days before we had the current World Wide Web, peculiar culture, subcultures of the weird, subcultures of the unusual and imaginative were much less segmented than they are now. And so Rocky Horror, even now, draws a very wide spectrum of people, but at the moment, Rocky Horror, well, let's just say that Rocky Horror back then drew just about everybody. Any sort of unusual person there could be came out for Rocky Horror. When we couldn't show Rocky, we had to say, what would make events that all kinds of unusual people would enjoy? And we started doing that as part of our club, our college organization. And when I left college, I realized, after spending some time in the corporate world, that that was what I wanted to do with my life, and that's what I've been pursuing ever since.
Wow. So for 20 years, so you started with the Rocky Horror Show, then you got into Renaissance Fair, I understand it?
The Wicked Winter Renaissance Fair, like a Renaissance Fair. I actually started with the Rocky Horror Picture Show in college, took a break for a few years, and worked in corporate marketing. And then when that was done, I actually started something called Jeff Mach's Cult Movie Overnight. The idea being that one thing that people really liked, particularly back before the ubiquity of screens and the ability to watch just about anything anywhere on demand. All kinds of unusual people like to get together to watch that strange beast, the cult film. And that was a somewhat uniting factor. What I had not realized was that while many people liked it, relatively few people were really passionate about it, and having given the event that name, I couldn't say, no, the name is just about an idea. I didn't have enough power or reach back then to get people past the name, and indeed, I would recommend that unless you really have a vast, tremendous reach, a gigantic reach, you not try to do something where you have to go against your own name. I could never get people to really understand, unless they were personal friends, that what we were looking at was an event for all the kinds of people who enjoyed unusual things, therefore would be interested in unusual film. We did that for 5 years. Our largest event was 220 people. The last one, the final cult movie overnight. Next year, we switched to a Renaissance fair and created a Renaissance fair for unusual people, feeling, well, Renaissance fairs are a great place for all manner of weird people, and all manner of weird people enjoy Renaissance fairs. Why don't we create one? Mm-hmm. And that event was 2,200 people. It was a tremendous jump, and we were by no means ready. But that event launched us headfirst into events, and that's where we are now.
Okay. So how did the Steampunk's World Fair come about? Like, how did you learn about steampunk, and what was that Eureka moment said, okay, we can do something with this?
You know, I actually learned about steampunk through the person who had been helping put on the final overnight. I have the good fortune for that to have been Deborah Castellano, who is the inventor of SalonCon, the first steampunk event. And I went to her event not really knowing a lot about it, except that it would be something about Victoriana. And I saw these peculiar people with what appeared to be surreal takes on Victoriana. And I said, what is this? And people said, this is steampunk. And I said, I don't know what this is, but this is marvelous. Later on, I found a couple of people who were really into steampunk, and we sort of realized that nobody was really doing steampunk. We put together a small coalition of people who really loved steampunk and used the Steampunk World Fair's idea. We were not necessarily the very first people in the entire world to do a steampunk festival. Certainly there were festivals before then, but especially in the United States, most steampunk events before that time were based on the old literary science fiction convention model, which is a perfectly wonderful model, and I do love literary science fiction conventions, even if I don't love the politics of where literary science fiction has gone in the past decade.
Yeah.
But there are very much models based on panel, 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 performance, panel, panel, free time, panel, panel, adult panel, bedtime.
Right.
And we thought what we would do instead was much more like what we did with the Wicked Fair, where we felt we were sort of competing with and or working in the world of Renaissance fairs, where it was less about, is this particular discussion happening in this room, though that's important, and much more about everywhere you go, you will spend the entire day, and in fact, this being a weekend-long event and not, as most Renaissance fairs are, a day trip. Everywhere you go, throughout the entire weekend, you will find something new to astound and delight you, which meant that we had to take every piece of space that we had and could find and put something unique and interesting there. We basically wanted to show people steampunk culture, which is art and music and film and dancing and song and food and drink and competitions and collaborations and creations and vending and performance of all kinds, and not just conversations alone, though of course conversations are very dear to our hearts. And that model proved to be honestly something that people found tremendously fun, and pretty much as soon as people sort of started hearing that there was an event that did this, folks started pouring in to buy tickets, and we very quickly leapt to being the largest event of its kind, pretty much anywhere around. And we are still the largest ticketed steampunk event anywhere in the world. In fact, by a rather large margin.
How many visitors did you draw in the first year? What year was that, by the way? And what do you expect to draw in this year?
We drew in about 3,000 people way back in 2010, and we're looking at about 7,000 people coming up in 2017.
Mm-hmm. Are most people also in costume?
Well, two answers to that. One being that we were some of the first people to say, as long as you are interested in steampunk and want to see steampunk and are here with genuine love or interest, curiosity for what we're doing, then your costume matters much less. You will probably enjoy it more if you're wearing some sort of steampunk garb, but you certainly don't have to be, and that was very important to us. That was a really critical point for us. And part of it is that many people do not consider their steampunk gear to be costume any more than a goth would consider wearing goth clothing a costume. Mm-hmm. Or indeed a business person going to a business meeting in a suit would consider themselves to be in costume. It is garb. It is some of what we wear, whether that is sometimes or all the times.
So that brings me kind of to the question, what do you believe a steampunk is?
I don't believe that there is any one human being who ought to define that. I think steampunk is a more powerful, more vibrant, more happy movement without anyone defining that. And the more I might be in a position of some kind of authority, the more I might have some sort of voice that people hear, the louder my own voice is, the less I ought to be the one saying, this is steampunk and that is not steampunk.
Right.
I think that steampunk, in general, if you wanted me to give you my basic thought, steampunk is some use of some sort of Victorian era flavor in order to create some kind of effect in the modern world. And that is very specifically a broad, open universe people can play with. And it very intentionally does not say things like steampunk happens in precisely this time, though if you want to say the Victorian era had a very specific time, you could, but obviously for me, it does not go outside of the spirit of what I'm doing to sometimes dabble in the 1920s or sometimes dabble in the pre-Victorian era. And I definitely would say that it is a flavor or a spice or a soul, but I would not necessarily say that it is a look that you have to have or a style that you have to have, and it does not necessarily have to be European. Mm-hmm. I would define steampunk much more by what can you do with it, and when you do this with something that you feel might be steampunk, how do people take it? How does it make people feel? What change does it make in the world? What change, I don't mean that in a pretentious way, that you must say be changing the world through some sort of active charity or legislation. I just mean every act that we do, every creative act, changes the world a little bit. How does this particular creative act of steampunk change the world that those around you, and perhaps, depending on who sees what you do, those far beyond your immediate reach, react to it? How do people take it? How do people feel? How do people like it? What do people do? How are they inspired? Those are questions which interest me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agree. Maybe we can have a separate talk about on that subject some other time. But let's continue on your events, because, well, let's start with the Darkside of the Con that's coming up. What is it? How did that come to be? Let's start with the history.
You know, I've loved goth my entire life. I've been going to goth spaces and goth clubs since I was in high school, like a lot of people. But I've never had a chance to throw a goth event, and I am a little bit careful in how I decide to create or open up a new event. I would always like to open something up as hopefully a benefit to that world or that community. Mm-hmm. And so one of the challenges with goth was that I've always, almost always, with the exception of a few events, been more of a participant than a creator, more of an appreciator than an expert. Um, I'm not someone who has spent a lot of time building the goth community and thus deserves a following in the goth community for doing that. So I had to meet really wonderful, friendly, approachable goths. Um, in this case, the incredible folks of Vampire Freaks who wanted to do an event. And so together we could team up and we could use their knowledge of goth and the fact that they have a real history in the gothic world. And while I'm not saying that everyone needs to have a history in order to take on an event or do an event, it is certainly helpful when you are going to create an event that's going to affect a lot of people in a given world, that you give them a reason to feel like you have an involvement with that world and that you are coming into that world because you want to improve it, because you have something to say, because you want to add something better.
Mm-hmm.
And going in with people who know that community and have served that community a long time and have a lot of their own lives poured into making the world a better community for goths made us much more comfortable working on some sort of goth event.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about Vampire Freaks for a moment, because how long have they been around? I think they were a thing when I was back in high school. That's like, oh my god, that's like over 20 years ago.
Vampire Freaks have literally been around for decades. They've been around for a very, very long time. And it's been an evolving website. Before Facebook completely dominated our social sphere, there were specialty websites for a number of different interests, and most of those have not really survived. Witchfox for pagans technically still exists, but I doubt, and it's still a valuable resource, but I doubt that Witchfox has more people involved in pagan activities on its site than Facebook does.
Right.
I think it might be a more focused space for that. But as someone said in 2010, Facebook is social media as we know it at the moment. And even with the advent of Tumblr, and even with some people taking their leave of Facebook for a number of reasons, Facebook still is where the most social media is happening. So you look at a place like Vampire Freaks, just as you look at a place like FetLife, and say, what happens when you have a place that is absolutely dedicated to this world, this subculture, this idea, this set of people? And Vampire Freaks spent a whole lot of time trying to think about how to make a great landscape for goths and for goth in general, and for anyone who loves that which is dark alternative. And that's a really special thing.
Yeah, so to summarize, Vampire Freaks is a kind of, decade-old, it's not a forum, it's more of a community hub, isn't it?
I would call it a community hub.
Yeah.
Or a social space.
Yeah, I still know some people that post there. I haven't been on it for a long time. I do think I have a account there. Maybe I should do something with it. Let's talk about Darkside of the Con. Well, what can people expect there when they go to the dark side, so to speak?
Well, we're actually going to turn out all the lights, so nobody will actually know what's going on.
Okay.
I was really hoping you would laugh. That was my dear hope.
Oh, sorry, I have to disappoint. But maybe it's my Dutch sense of humor, you know.
So I should say something bad about Swedish people?
Swedish? I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the Swedish, I must say.
Well, then unfortunately, you are not like the only other Dutch person I've ever known, and I can't guess your sense of humor. I better not try to make any more jokes.
Please do.
No, time for complete and utter seriousness.
Uh,
Um,
are the tentacles coming out now?
sorry. So, what people can expect from Darkside of the Con, you know, some of the things that I consider integral to any Jeff Mack event, and I was really happy when Vampire Freaks had the same level of excitement, was that you would go anywhere in the event and find something cool to do, find something exciting, find people to talk to, find a show happening, find a performance. That the event is meant for wandering around, that there are vendors all throughout the event, that there's entertainment all throughout the event, that there are discussions all throughout the event, that we use every space in the hotel pretty much, up to and including the pool for the pool party and other things. You can certainly expect incredible goth, dark, alternative, industrial dance parties by a lineup of DJs simply spectacular, and I would not do them justice if I tried to name them myself. Really, go to the website, check the DJ lineup. The lineup of DJs is unbelievable. The dancing is going to be fantastic and will continue late into both Friday and Saturday nights. And expect to get up late. But I don't believe things start on Saturday until noon, which I am very much in favor of. I've been to conventions, for example, which started everything at 8 a.m. And I thought, this is earlier than I wake up for work. I don't want to be at a panel at this hour. But people can expect, above all things, a friendly, welcoming atmosphere which says, if you are here because you enjoy, love, are curious about, want to be a part of these things, then you are in the right place and we welcome you.
All right. So will there both be cybergoth music and the more mainstream goth, I guess I should call it?
Cybergoth, old school goth, new school goth. The variety of music is really pretty much limitless. You've got everything from Centrifuge to Voltaire. You've got everything from that which is deeply electronic to that which is completely acoustic. You've got DJs who are spinning everything from the songs I danced to in the 90s to stuff that, as far as I can tell, was actually made by alien intelligences last year in 2016 and beamed to this planet via some sort of teleporter ray. We really strongly believe in a vast, vast variety of what we do. And so far, it's really turned out well for us.
All right. How many people do you expect this year?
I'm going to say this is going to be a nice, intimate event. I'm going to say that we're looking at about 1,500 people. And I think that's going to be a really fun turnout. I think it's going to be the right size for a first-year event as we work out the kinks. I think that people who attend are going to be really lucky because they're going to get the event at its freshest, its newest, and they're going to see the event as it wakes up and emerges from its coffin, as it were, and goes out in search of new blood. And I'm almost as excited by that as I am by the prospect of what I'm going to do on Monday, which is think about everything that I did, everything that we saw, everything that happened, and I'll be taking notes throughout the weekend. And on Monday, I get back to work and start thinking about how to make Darkside of the Con 2, which is March 23rd through 25th, 2018, at the Radisson Hotel of Piscataway, even better.
So you mentioned this is one of the few or only goth event that lasts the entire weekend. Is there a reason? Is there a decline in gothic events?
Now, I am not an expert on goth. I do not speak for the goth community. I am honored to be a participant of the goth community, but I would not consider myself to be any sort of elder. Except in the sense that I am kind of an elder by being old. But I've been reading up on this, and I've been watching a lot of people speak about it on YouTube, and the theory that I hear most is that a lot of goth events have been replaced by an online goth community. That one of the challenges goth has always faced more than steampunk, for example, has been a certain amount of outright persecution, a certain amount of challenge, a certain amount of real difficulty, not just difficulty being accepted by the rest of the world, but to some extent a desire to not be what the rest of the world is, not necessarily exactly be accepted by the world as it stands. And that meant that what events there were tended to draw people together who otherwise could not easily communicate with each other. And now that you have online communities for real ease of communication, Vampire Freaks included, Facebook included, websites like New Goth City, and the ability to find, say, goth wares, goth items for sale online, and indeed a tremendous variety of goth goods on sale on the internet. People have different reasons for going out and different reasons for staying in, different motivations. It's much like the music industry. You know, when music became basically digital and electronically transported, there was a lot of fear that the music industry would end, and there was a worry that concert culture might die. And concerts did not die, music merchandising did not die, the music industry did not die. It simply changed and evolved and continues to change and evolve to grow with the way the world is changing and evolving. And I think for Gothic events to happen, they too need to change and evolve, and it's really difficult to watch something that you love as it dies or as it fades or as it becomes smaller. And while Goth itself may be perfectly alive, Goth events have experienced some challenges, and this is not saying anything against those events. I think that's very difficult for promoters to handle and work with, and I can understand that. I don't have some better perspective or anything like that. I just know that I love putting on events, and know that when I go out to put on an event, I say, I am going to put on an event that will be loved by these people. That is my goal. And it is less a goal than saying, can I bring these goths from here to this place? And because the way I look at it is different, I think I am more willing to experiment with something whose model is in flux. I think the model of what a goth event is and what makes a successful goth event is in flux. And not having been a real participant, not having often participated in an older model of goth events, in a pre-internet model of goth events in terms of putting them on, I have less impediment about trying new ways of doing things.
Right. Yeah, I think most people understand what you're trying to say. So yeah, how has the goth community online responded to this event?
Well, I know that for myself, I've found people to be incredibly friendly towards the event, incredibly receptive, incredibly kind, for that matter, incredibly giving, incredibly supportive. I do remember a world where there was a lot of judgment in some goth communities and in some goth spaces, where the phrase "you're not goth enough" was used completely unironically. And I find myself in a place where people are encouraging me, and people are offering me more opportunities, and people are basically helping this event grow and become bigger, and giving it advice and giving it shares and giving it affection. And I feel incredibly fortunate. I mean, I knew that I was dealing with a really wonderful community, but I guess I hadn't realized how wonderful a community it was until I had a chance to actually get in and invest in it, and I guess at this point I can say become a part of it.
All right. Good. Well, I'm really looking forward now to actually speaking to one of these guys. To maybe they can give me more insight into the goth community, especially because steampunk is very much inspired by its goth heritage. There is a large segment of the steampunk community that did come from the goth culture. For one reason or another. So I'd like to know more about that, even if it just means more understanding about steampunk. Because I do think there is a very important connection there. Yeah, let's go to your other event, back to the Steampunk World Fair, and that's going to be in May, early May. And
That is correct, and this is a good time to get to it. As I'm very sorry for the time
I know.
uncertainty. I'm going to have to head out soon. Next time we talk, I'll make sure it's not before a major event, and I will check the difference in times between where you live and where I live. Make sure I'm on the right page.
Yes.
But
perfect.
yes, let's talk a little about the Steampunk World's Fair.
Yes. So yeah, let's just talk about what can people expect from it.
Everything. This is ridiculous. This is beyond ridiculous. We have never had a lineup this big. We've never had this many performers and entertainers. We've never had this many shows. We've never had this much going on. And we're an event which prides itself on having more going on than anything else I've ever been to. I mean, literally, if you were at a large corporate event instead of a small company event, and we're a small company, we have a total of 3 full-time employees at this point. We are a small company with some really dedicated part-time folks and contractors and amazing volunteers, but we're not a big company like New York Comic Con or Disney or New York Renaissance Fair or anything like that. We have more going on than anybody else anywhere I have ever seen in my entire life, in all the time I've been going to events, looking at events, studying events. I mean, basically you have to go to something as big as Dragon Con to find more going on, and Dragon Con has to happen in so many different hotels that you kind of choose your own pathway into it. You have to choose an event experience. There's no way you could try to take it all in. And the Steampunk World's Fair prides itself on being exactly at the very physical human limit of what you could possibly take in any one weekend. It is the absolute physical limit of what you can comfortably walk or propel, assuming your mobility challenged, yourself through in the space of one weekend and still see everything at least in small pieces. I spend the entire event at least 18 hours a day walking around everywhere, taking notes, talking to people, looking at things, making sure everything is right or trying to fix things that might not be right. And there is so much going on. I can't even begin to describe it. I mean, just telling people you really should go to the website and check the entertainment list. We have more steampunk vendors than you will find anywhere else, anywhere. We have more steampunk entertainment than you will find anywhere. We have more art and culture, performance, music, sound, speech, everything happening than you will find in any steampunk place anywhere ever in the history of anything, because we are bigger than we've ever been in that regard. And at the same time, we've very carefully made sure that we've kept ourselves in the same spaces. We're just careful about how we use those spaces so that we have something very approachable. What we have is not a massive, overwhelming experience where you go in and say, I don't know what to do. Instead, you go in, you say, I want to do everything. We've worked really hard to make that happen. It's impossible to describe even a little bit of the Steampunk World's Fair, because that doesn't do justice to the atmosphere that you get when really everyone is doing everything all at once. It's pretty unbelievable, and we are still not finished confirming performers and shows and special events and surprises and games, and so much more is coming.
I see you yourself do also perform.
I do. I've been a singer-songwriter for over 30 years. I wasn't a very good singer-songwriter for the first 10 or so years, but I've written a lot of steampunk songs, including one of the first, or depending on how you want to look at it, depending on whether you want to see it, either this or Dolls of New Albion by Paul Shapira, possibly the first steampunk rock opera, Absinthe Heroes, which was produced at the first Steampunk World's Fair and then produced in a larger production last year. And I love songwriting. I I love a chance to perform and sing and tell people stories in a musical format, and I'll be doing a number of peculiar and unusual steampunk songs that I've written.
I see a question. Is the Steampunk World Fair bigger than the Asylum in Lincoln, UK?
Well, I do not spend too much of my time going around and looking to see who's bigger. I haven't lately gone around to check and see if anyone else currently says that they are larger. I'm now looking at their website. I do not know.
Mm-hmm.
If the Asylum is fewer than 7,000 people, then yes, I would say that the Asylum is a smaller steampunk event. But I'd have to check.
Yeah, might be interesting for those that care.
Certainly, I'm going to say that I hope the Asylum is a fantastic event.
I heard great things about it.
For an event, the event says that it is the largest and longest running steampunk festival in the world. It may be that I'm simply terribly uninformed, but let me put it this way. I don't see any reason to argue with them, especially since we don't have a representative here. And also, looking at their website, it's hard for me to gauge performance or exact size, so I don't know. But honestly, I am going to strongly doubt that it is larger than the Steampunk World's Fair. But if it is larger than the Steampunk World's Fair, congratulations to it. Certainly, I'm now curious about it. But
who knows? Yeah. Who knows?
I'm also going to note that we are the world's largest steampunk festival, and the Asylum is a convention. But gosh, it does look like a wonderful event. Folks, if you can go to the Asylum, you surely should go to the Asylum. I'm sure it's a lovely event, and I'm sure they do wonderful things.
I hear great things about it, so I'm sure it is. And I actually should go at one point. But anyway, are there any subjects you want to talk about? Because you already gave a good description of the Steampunk World Fair.
Gosh, I'm sorry. Now you've got me looking kind of curiously at the Asylum's website.
I'm sure to post a link down in the description as well.
I will have to check back around August, as that is certainly a considerably smaller lineup than ours, but then again, 162 days out, our lineup's really quite small. So yeah, I hope you'll forgive me. Give me a point of curiosity. As far as I know, the Steampunk World's Fair is still very much the largest steampunk venue in the world, with the most entertainment. And if someone else is the largest, wonderful, we shall just strive to be the best.
Good, well said, sir. All right. Well, if you have said everything you wanted to say, I think we can go to the final words of inspiration.
Very well.
So,
don't take any wooden nickels. They're not actual nickels.
Good advice. Good advice.
There is nothing to fear except everything in the entire universe, because you're probably going to die someday. Let's drink a toast to water, without which we would not be alive. Also, I don't have any champagne, and so drinking a toast to champagne would feel kind of ironic.
How much percent is gin and tonic of water? I have no idea.
If it's a gin and tonic that I'm mixing, the percentage of water involved will be 0 if possible.
I need to have your recipe.
And final, actual, more serious thoughts. It's been a pleasure to be on this show. I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to speaking to you when I'm in less of a rush right before an event. And I do hope to see people at Darkside of the Con and the Steampunk World's Fair, and heck, pretty much I hope to see people in general at any events I might go to, whether or not that event is one of mine or someone else's. And I wish all of the weird, unusual, peculiar, subcultural events out there in the universe all the joy and all the luck that could possibly happen.
All right. I think those are fine words to end on. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this episode of Radio Retrofuture with Jeff Mach as our guest. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And I want to attend you to the fact we also have a Facebook group and of course a page on Facebook that you can join, so you'll always be posted on new videos, upcoming events and possible guests. And of course, if you want to be on the show, just send me a private message or an email through the Facebook page. Everything is possible. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just gonna wish you adieu, and as always, make it your way.
5, 6, 7, 8, hit it!